Leadership is that reclaiming of the intentionality of how we spend our time, our money, and our energy. We are these soul-led, intuitive beings that have access to so much rich information and guidance. We need to have permission within ourselves to not only vision the future that we choose, but to create it and to invite others into that co-creation. And for me, this is all beautiful leadership. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful. It's wonderful to be here with you. I am always growing in deeper appreciation for this community that gathers around the possibility within each of us and the world we're creating. Our new experience, the beautiful leadership immersion, begins very soon. The core themes we are exploring are redefining leadership and worth, shadows, trauma and liberation, embodiment and biohacking, vision, intuition and edge walking, sacred activism and decolonization, creativity, cultural futurism and flow consciousness, collaboration and community. It's this intertwined weave of inner transformation with systemic change. We explore how to really listen and find our unique call to action. We adventure into how to see beauty and find the possibility in the space we find ourselves in. You can find out more by going to the courses page on our website, www.thefutureisbeautiful.co. We talk more about this experience in the last 20 minutes or so of this conversation, in case you want to skip ahead, listen to that, and maybe come back to the rest of the conversation later. However, the whole episode is perhaps an example of what beautiful leadership is, how an appreciation for true beauty can enrich our lives and guide us to making better choices. What I'm excited about is being on a group exploration at this particular moment in time where we actually support each other in making the choices that allow our lifestyles to reflect our values. So we actually have our needs met and are able to be in alignment with the visions that we are holding and give each other the confidence to do so. If we don't do this now in 2020, with the restrictions we are living amongst, then when will we do it? I know that I don't want to live in hope of a vision, but be actively co-creating it with every part of my being and a level of non-attachment, but actually to be living it rather than intellectualizing about it or talking about it. As schools are open again, and we could get caught into the daily grind, back to a sort of normal with much of our social life still distanced, with much of our ability to be together, to laugh, to touch, to play, it could be easy to get disheartened or depressed. So this is an invitation into looking at our lives and seeing what is possible to create from here, from where you find yourself right now, for lifting each other up and for creating beauty and possibility. Come and be part of this community of humans as we embody beautiful leadership together. The guest faculty that's emerging for this is also very special, including Sally Kempton, Jyoti, Nina Simons, Swade Martin, Ed Gillespie, Stephanie Mines, Sienna Sherman, and Annegret Affolderbach. And these are all people that you know from the show, and I'm also beginning to invite in people that you might not know that will be able to come and share their stories of beautiful leadership and how that has been for them as an experience. You may remember a couple of years ago that Lucy White interviewed me on the show. That was back on episode 46. Continuing that tradition, our new writer Annegret interviewed me this week. I loved being in conversation with her. In fact, we spent the whole afternoon sharing. Annegret has been a friend and a mentor, and I love the way that she sees the world. She was our guest on episode 2 of this show and joined us as a writer on this series when we came back on air in June. Annegret is a cultural futurist and experienced designer. As an influential change maker with wide-reaching vision for planet and people, she connects humankind and brands to the unexpected, rooted in cultures, lifestyles, and nature. As for me, I won't read my own bio here, but this conversation does reveal more about the journey that I've been on, especially in terms of leadership and understanding this invitation of beautiful leadership. And for those of you that feel to contribute to the garden of the future is beautiful that you'll hear more about shortly, you can find a link for how to get involved on our community page. You are very welcome to come and plant and water and nurture seeds with us. In this conversation called Flourishing Possibilities Birthed from Our Intuitive Gardens, we explore the themes of beautiful leadership, futurism, and style as we contemplate the question, can beauty and community be the anchors of our future? I hope this episode moves you to a place of inspiration, wonder, and action from your soul to create beauty. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Ghadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful.
I am so happy to be here with you today and to be able to turn the tables on conversation to, join you from literally the other side of the world, from South Africa, and you being in the UK at this time, to have a conversation with you. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here and to feel the other side of that invitation.
I feel very happy that the timing has it that you wanted to speak about your time with the podcast, also about all the other exciting things that you've been doing 3 years into this beautiful podcast. I feel so honored to be holding this conversation as I've been there right from the beginning, not just with the conversation with you, but also observing you in the creation of this beautiful space where you bring together so much wisdom, abundance of offerings. And I would love to hear from you how this journey has unfolded for you in the last 3 years.
Thank you. Well, first, I want to say how gorgeous it is to have you as part of the team creating this podcast since we came back with this series in June. And this time of these last few months, I think for everyone on planet Earth have been quite something. And for me, it's been this particular initiation with the death of my father and the completion of my book. Having you as part of this team, bringing the words and the conversations to life and the imagery has been such an incredible support. I just love the energy behind this female-powered team that we have that's kind of coming from all these different spots all over the world. That also to be working with you when we've now known each other, I don't know, for 12 or so years, and have been able to share and witness each other through these journeys into creativity and into systemic change, leadership, art, regeneration, reimagining and re-understanding and unlearning and everything that we've been doing during this time. So for me, this podcast has been a really immense place of connection and learning, as somebody that thrives on what's real, what's underneath the surface, to me that's part of what beauty is. It's really being able to be in that depth and that authenticity, to question and to notice and to weave together, to be able to have these kinds of conversations, which are essentially the 2 a.m. deep and meaningfuls that I had in my youth, when I didn't know that I could just call someone up and be like, hi, can we talk about the meaning of life and what it is to be a human on a podcast? It's really a joy and privilege to be able to have those conversations and to meet so many interesting people, or to connect with them on a level that feels appropriate. Whereas, often we meet people and we get stuck in that kind of like, how you doing? Like, what's happening? And to really be able to go into that place of where our fears and possibility come alive. I found that so nourishing for my soul. And even in these months that we've been on air for this series, obviously I didn't know like when exactly my father was going to die, and it happened that we started the series as I came to their house, to my parents' house, and he had died within 3 weeks. And so we'd started the series and it was happening, and then it was happening afterwards in the after time. And yeah, when I took a little bit of time out and stepped back a little bit, I thought, wow, was that the right thing to have done, to have kept these conversations going? Actually, I felt, yeah, of course it was. It was so nourishing, and to be able to hold that liminal space that we're all in during this time, and all of these questions that have been coming up around race and decolonization, around reimagining, around leadership, and that's also what was very much swirling in my inner world, as well as the collective consciousness. And it was really interesting with this series because these interviews had been long planned. Some of them I was trying to do a year ago. Others of them, there's a whole series, a collaboration that had been planned since November. So it just ended up flowing and fitting kind of perfectly into what was swirling in the collective consciousness. I find that to have that space where not only I get to explore and have part of my sight looking at what we can't yet all see, as well as what's breaking inside my heart and our hearts, and to get to share that with a community of people is quite something. And I absolutely love that aspect of this project, which has always been about that connection to our worth in terms of the beauty of our dreams, in terms of what it is that we can see, that if culture and society and education hadn't told us was stupid, would be like the most natural thing in the world to be doing. I love to connect with people with that framing.
Yeah. At the time that we are living in, to have a platform where you can easily draw on that human connection and to further extend it is in itself a very beautiful thing. I also feel that the idea of the name behind the podcast, The Future is Beautiful, is really coming alive again during the time that we're experiencing at this point. It also gives us a real hope to look at how we can cultivate new futures. It gives us pathways. It gives us maybe even reminders of how to do that. With the conversations that I have participated in these last few months, a new depth has arisen that is also centering around a theme that is very important to you. That is working with leadership, but that is working into beautiful leadership. I know that you have something very beautiful planned for us. That is an immersion, and I would love to hear more about it.
Thank you for that question. Before I share about the immersion and what's coming together around that, I want to share that we had our patrons call for The Future is Beautiful. We have this gorgeous patron community of people from all over the world that have felt moved by these conversations over the years and donate some money. And one thing that I really want to do in the coming months is to create two things, kind of maybe move away from this notion of patrons, which also, even just as a word, feels quite old story, and taking it deeper into a place of community where the podcast isn't just about ideas, intellect, and that kind of sense of resonance, but actually it creates opportunity and space for local projects and community to arise, as well as that ground of solidarity. And so the thing that I'm exploring now is to create an app that will connect the community, that will also allow people to see like which other members of the community are close by, so that we can enjoy the riches of a global online community space that anchors in with the conversations that we're having on the podcast. And the very essence of this podcast, which came from that question and from the book, what is the future that you choose? And how are you going to create that? And how can we co-create it together? And so that's something that we're exploring. With that, I'm wanting to create this thing rather than like a board of like directors. I'm calling it the garden, that anybody that feels called with different perspectives or expertise or time that they want to give to the growing and the nurturing of The Future is Beautiful as something that can support us in these visions unfolding and this community creation, building and fostering and nurturing, that we can have this space called the garden. And in that we can talk about some of the really practical things, like which platform to do the app on and like that kind of thing, and what to name things, and also that these seeds can be there, that people that feel called to water can water. That feels something really important to share, because I feel like as much as I've been holding the vision of this project, and not just the vision, but like so many late nights of like admin and web building and all kinds of things. I tend not to do the late nights anymore, but you know, long days. But over this like 10 years, there's been like a lot, and I just really want it to be something that really serves like this new story that we are living, and that everything that 2020 has brought to the surface is inviting us deeper into living. That leads me on to this immersion.
Yeah, I wanted to, before we go into the beautiful leadership immersion, I just wanted to put here that the idea of a beautiful garden that holds so much foresight and shares so much insight with people to grow with a network of universal roots is a very beautiful thing. And, you know, I'm a big fan of plants and gardening, so this is very close to my heart. I'm very happy to hear this idea and this kind of vision come alive in your hearts as one of the next steps. I think this is something very important at this time, and also a very beautiful way to look at a different format, to cultivate a different way of doing things and to stay true to that, which you have done all this time. I mean, that in itself, over the space of 10 years, to stay true, to always be visionary in this space and true to you, is quite a remarkable achievement. I think you've really shown leadership leadership from the heart consistently, no matter how much hardship and how many late nights along the way. It is leadership truly from the heart. And so I'm very excited to hear about your next offering that you have prepared for us.
Thank you so much, sweetheart. And you know that it's not just a late night. It's like you've seen the tears and like, why isn't this working? And like, is it just time to stop those kind of questions? And I've always appreciated those conversations that we've shared and how your perspective and the perspective of the luminaries that have been part of this project remind me to anchor into a different way to the models that we've seen before. This idea of a garden came from a friend and a patron of the show, Andre Vachis. He suggested, like, why don't you just start small in ways of asking people in, inviting people in to contribute, and making it like not like this thing of like, now you're on this board and your commitment is this and I'm going to send you this report and you're going to have, but actually just making it much more lighter and more fluid and more like emergent, that people can dip in and dip out, and they can say, I'm going to just water this little seed here, and it can grow in that way, and that there can be that trust that the real parts that are needed will show up when they are really required. The casualty of this project at times has been listening to these old paradigm notions of how things should be. For example, I have invested time and resources into courses that teach me how to sell webinars or community, and then I just end up going, this is just a load of manipulation and it's not really what I want to build this on. And then I'm like, oh well, that was a waste of money. But it's that part of me that has had to do things in the traditional way, or at least explore the traditional way, in order to come to a real place of certainty that that's not the way that we're co-creating from here. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without having at least gone down those alleyways or listened to those people that were stepping in as mentors or guidance to say, oh, you need to do this, and see what this person's done. And that actually, when things have worked for this project, it's always been when I'm not doing anything like that. And it's always just come from just a real place of heart. If you just change the whole way that the whole perspective from which you understand something, then there's space for what's emergent, and there's space for what's true, and there's space for what's beautiful, and there's space for people to come in and be who they are. And for me, if it's nurturing a space where people can really come in from that place of truth and vision, those little whispers of the soul that often get ignored and pushed down, then actually it doesn't really matter if we make money or if we have 1 million people do anything or whatever. It's we live in this world where people will refer to what I'm doing as content, and I'm like, no, we don't do content.
That is just a whole nother difficult term and a whole different conversation we could go into. While you were speaking, what came to mind is the idea of intuitive gardening, that I'm very happy this whole garden idea is going to unfold for this project, because intuitive gardening leaves room for the garden to also lead us. I think that is exactly what you're describing. And it's exactly what this kind of project is about. It's about, as much as we can lead it, there has to be that breathing space for it to lead us down avenues and new paths to, I guess, open our eyes and our hearts to possibilities that we haven't seen yet. And I think it does this beautifully. The space that you have created is a space of hope. As much as it is about giving us new insights, it's a place of hope. And I think gardens growing out of this will give us that message even stronger. And I'm happy to hear that there will be gardeners. I wonder who they will be. And I think that these will be very exciting people from all around the world. And I think one of the most beautiful things we can do at this time is to really tap into our local communities. So I think this is a really wonderful way forward. Really wonderful. Thank you, patrons.
I love this notion of intuitive gardening and an intuitive garden, and actually centering the garden, because something that I have always thought about as the future is beautiful is, as well as it not being content, it's not really something that I've created. It's something that has created aspects of me. I've always felt that it's this being, it's got its own aliveness, like it knows who to bring on the show when. It just like guides me into all of that. I don't ever sit and strategically make a decision about anything. I don't plot out the calendar. It always just happens, this interview and this interview. And you know, now from being on the show, sometimes we don't know what the interview is going to be, and then it appears. And obviously, you know, there's always this relationship between like the intuitive and then the action that you take. And so I might take the action, send the emails, invite people onto the show, but I don't do it with like it has to be now, and then it pours in. It's quite incredible how that happens. And then how it always feels like, oh yeah, of course, this is the conversation for this week. And so yeah, I absolutely love that. And for me, it's really about creating experiences, even within the conversations, that they are experiences that move us, that speak to our soul, that open up that possibility. When I feel into what is hope, what is possibility, you know, what is it to be optimistic when we are surrounded by so much imagery and stories of what's not working and where the pain is and where the suffering is. I feel like when we really tap into soul, like soul is by its very nature all about possibility. That's what soul does and what soul brings. Like, otherwise, why would we be here? Like, why would we have come? What would we be here to offer if we weren't being guided by soul, by what it is that we are learning, what we're weaving together, what's unfolding, what we're co-creating? That sense of possibility, of hope, of optimism it's just central to our being, and it doesn't negate the suffering and the difficulties and the challenges. It's definitely not positivity and happiness. It's just about being guided by a force that is allowing us to see the possibility and to take breaths, take steps, take action towards that. And sometimes that action is also just to sit and process the sadness. And it can be that dynamic, this hope, this possibility, this beauty.
I also feel that sharing the possibility and the beauty in the way that people are sharing it on the future is beautiful. It's giving us anchors along the way of finding this new path into this new world that we can all see, that we can, some of us already feel, that some of us are already living and breathing. So I feel this space is of such importance to hold these conversations, to give us these anchors, and also to give us a place where we can recognize that we are not on our own on this path. And that also is a reminder of there are others. We are not other. There are others. We are a community. We might not all be locally huddled together, but we are actually a global community of people doing this work of anchoring, envisioning, speaking, and it takes many forms, but guiding us forward, holding this space in a digital place. For the time that you conceived this, which I know was your initial thinking was in 2015 to create a podcast. That's very forward thinking. Some people are still getting cold feet at podcasts now. And I'm glad your heart stayed warm around it, because now that you're planting the garden, it's going to be an Amazonian forest very quickly. I'm certain of it. That will bring up a whole nother layer of offering and conversation that I think is also nice that you can't foresee yet. I think this excitement of not knowing what conversation is coming is part of the enjoyment. And I know people behind the scenes don't necessarily know this, but that you are actually very much driven by your intuition, not just in your conversation, but in every aspect of your work. And so it's beautiful to know that we're going to be able to have a book where you speak about intuition so deeply and in so much detail.
This image that you've now given me of the Amazon, what came through, as you said, the Amazon, was that we know that the Amazon is also being attacked a lot, that there is so much need to protect what is important and what is life-giving. I feel like it's the same with something like this. Like, it's very easy to like blow something like this off as like silly. And I've had people be like, yeah, I wouldn't listen to the future is beautiful, or like, and then I've explained like what it actually is, and they're like, oh yeah, well, I wouldn't have listened to it because I just see it and I make this judgment or whatever. Or, like, how can you talk about beauty? And it's like, well, how can we not? Why are we here?
Exactly.
How do we want to live our lives? Like, what is it that we want to create? What is it that we want to notice? What is it that we want to nurture in ourselves and in our perspective? Because we know that that entire spectrum is available to us. Just if you look outside right now, you can see it. But if you look inside into your inner world, you can see that whole spectrum too. To be able to be in a relationship where we are able to be accepting and non-judgmental to the aspects that are more challenging about our own experience, both inner and as a global collective. But with that, to also be able to nurture our ability to experience the beauty and to be motivated by what's possible. Because I don't know about you, but like, it is very easy to be depressed right now. And there is a lot of depression right now. And I've heard that the depression rates have gone up. And of course, it makes sense because we know that we need things like touch, and we need community, and we need care. We've had Johan Hari on the show talking about depression and the collective issue of depression. And a lot of the measures of the way in which this pandemic has been treated has meant that we've lost a lot of the things that our souls and our body and our sense of selves really need in order to feel that connection, which drives us forward. Within that, it's like we have to do the best with the digital space that we have, and to be able to find ways of creating experience that remind us of that connection, and then also learn to feel the difficulties of this time. And I don't think anyone's immune from that, whatever situation you're in. And the more that you develop spiritually, the more you're able to access joy and to feel and to experience beauty. But you also feel the pain and you experience that, but you're able not to judge it and make it personal. Like, you're able to kind of hold that spectrum. Within that, I feel like that skill of seeing beauty, of seeing what's possible, allowing there to be everyday magic, everyday possibility, everyday wonder, everyday creativity, no matter if we're stuck in our small confined living space. Like that's the work that we can do on our inner world. But the more that we're able to do that together, or at least know that other people are part of that, are experiencing that, are nurturing that same quality, I think that makes us feel more connected, because so much of what's happening is collective in terms of consciousness. It really helps to have the skills to be able to understand the inner experience in relation to the wider experience, to allow ourselves to feel and experience joy no matter what else is happening.
Yeah, and to remember all the simple things that we do maybe daily that we forget that could give us joy, and how to cultivate them into daily ceremony of an opportunity at this time, actually, for most of us.
Absolutely. And I love this quote, I don't know, meme I've seen somewhere about, like, if you've ever felt that you don't fit in to the dominant story, like, it's because you're here to build the new one. And I feel the call of that is so much stronger than it's ever been. And for me, that call has always been strong. I feel very grateful to have place to gather other folk, even just to know that there are other people, even if you don't know them, even if you don't chat to them, that there are other people that are feeling and thinking the same things, that are on that resonant field. It helps with that feeling of isolation and loneliness, and it converts it into more and more possibility. The creation of this beautiful future, or the opportunity in the 2020 vision that we are being given this year, to fully see and understand and comprehend the systems in which we live and the ways in which they affect us. I love this term, cultural futurism. Can you tell us what it means?
In its most simple form, it is somebody who cultivates a new way of seeing the world, that looks at the cultures that we live in, taps into its most positive essence to bring that alive, to build a beautiful future and a more positive future for planet and people. That is where I sit with it. I feel the cultivating of it, goes into all the most minute details of, even in my own daily activities, on how I appreciate and tap into joy, how I tap into my own intuition, and how I tap into my own way of making life ceremonial, so that I can also be consistent in my conversation. We both know in our offerings, it takes a multitude of forms. And I guess the beauty of that for me personally is that it gives space for the conversation to change. So it might have started where we met, sustainability, sustainable fashion. That conversation has changed so much over the years. I feel much more deeply connected to the deeper details. And I would say the undercurrents of those conversations have always been my guides. And they have not changed. They've only become, I guess, more truthful and more simple in my life. And so I feel conversations and spaces where we can change conversations and where we can move with what they need us to be as much as what we would like them to become are very important. So in a way, those are spaces where I feel we can be fully ourselves and really unfold an inner freedom, that we can live in a system that doesn't necessarily provide this. Communal spaces and communities where we can hold those conversations are deeply important. But also communities where we can form language around new ideas that might come from a deep-seated feeling that is guided by something that we can see and feel, but we can't verbalize yet. I feel spaces where we can form language around it in communities where we feel safe is also very important.
Yes, this is the invitation into cultural futurism.
Yes, cultural futurism came out of what I was actually doing, out of the embodiment of the role that I was actually presented with in the business that I was running. When I sat with it for a long time, the role that took form for me was much more complex than somebody designing and somebody running a forward-thinking fashion business. It was much more than that. We were cultivating a new culture in different spaces and in different countries and in different workspaces, in different spaces between women from different cultures, a whole multitude of different spaces where we were cultivating a new culture and a new way of working and being together. And so I also felt that I needed to step up and honor what it was truly doing, and also honor what I am giving and presenting to the world. It's good for that to take shape in a title. I realized, actually, why not? I didn't feel I could own the designer, or I could own, certain titles people were attaching to what I was doing. But this, I feel I can fully stand in with my truth, in full embodiment with soul and mind and my whole being.
I love it because it speaks to profession, to doing as much more than the action, the skill, but to the values and the vision, the recognition that comes in many forms. I mean, I have so many job titles. Every time I get asked to write a bio or like write my job title, I'm always like, I don't know, like founder, jewelry designer, sustainable fashion advocate, activist, writer, author, speaker, yoga teacher, energy healer, intuitive therapist, facilitator. It just goes on and on and on, like the roles, because isn't to be human to be so many things? Aren't they just tools that we pick up in different moments?
This is exactly what I was just going to say. I realized that all these other forms of expressions are my tools, but the overarching life experience that I'm imparting is that of cultural futurism. Within that space, I can communicate what I need to communicate in different shapes and forms. When I have created projects, I've always thought about them as a space. And so it was also important to flip that back to myself and go, oh, this project, Annegret, what is this? What is the space? What does it look like? What do I want to be able to do in that space? And actually, when I conceived Tulips, it looked like that. I created a space, and I've always carried it in my mind and in my physical experience as a space, and spoken of it like that. Again, it's something that's also guided me as much as I tried to be its guide. So it became something very different. For it then to be spoken of as a business and something else just wasn't enough. It was that too, but it just wasn't enough.
Hello. We're taking a short pause from the conversation. On behalf of our team and our community, thank you for being here and co-creating The Future is Beautiful. Much dedication, love, and time goes into the production of this show. We believe in being advertising free in a world that's always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. And so we make this show with you and for you, thanks to your support. There are 3 ways you can be more involved, so we can share the vision, wisdom, and creativity here as we explore what it means to be a human in this time. You can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, posting episodes on social media, and doing iTunes reviews. You can support as a patron by making a monthly or one-off donation of your choice. And with this, you join the Global Patrons group and monthly video calls where we share connection and insight. You get to know the other amazing patrons from around the world, their stories and their work, and you offer direct support to me and the team, as well as being brought into the behind the scenes of creating something like this. It sounds like a lot, but it's as much or as little as you want to get involved in. You can become a member of Presence, our membership collective of care and practice, where we explore how to embody the themes of the podcast with workshops, calls, special events, tree whispers, and powerful tools, practices, and rituals that you can bring into your life. This is open to absolutely everybody as we create an inclusive and diverse space that celebrates well-being as a human right, where we explore together what it means to be creative, courageous, and connected to ourselves, each other, and the earth. This is about embodying sacred activism. We love meeting patrons and Presence members and how being part in this way weaves our lives together, as well as making this show possible. If anything from this conversation has moved or inspired you, please get more involved. All information can be found at www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community. This show really can't go on without your patronage and Presence membership, so please do make it happen. And now, back to the conversation.
As we are speaking about fashion and how we connected, you and I were doing other things before we even met in that space. But I feel it's very exciting to revisit an idea and for you to hopefully start unfolding an idea around style as being present, style and present very soon.
Yes, well, as you know very well,
yes,
that Style and Presence was a book that I've been probably working on since 2013. It got the name Style and Presence in 2014. I think I started working on this book in 2012. It's been a long time, basically.
I think well, I remember initial conversations probably in 2013. And so this must have been on your mind and in your body for a longer time.
Yeah. And what it was is it had started around a book, an education piece around sustainable fashion, around understanding where the very fabric of our lives comes from and how we treat it. As I was digging into that, I mean, I could have just written that book, like I had done a lot in that area. And I had created this thing called 12 Rules to Dress By. And I had been doing my own jewelry label. And I'd been working with the Ethical Fashion Forum. And I was doing a lot of talks at the time about how to think about like our clothing and what we put on. But what really kind of got to me, that's all the style part. Like, what do you put on and why? As I was feeling into what style is, what really came through was that style is an expression of the heart, and it's also about responding to the times that we live in. Fashion is often not that. It's like, oh, this is in fashion, or this is being sold to me right now. And we know we have these really insane number of seasons. We know that the whole supply chains around fashion is all just gone completely insane and is causing untellable amounts of harm and damage to the planet and to people. That how is that connected to this sense of style? Like, I step out like looking good. It's so distorted. And so for me, I was feeling into around that time that actually real style is about responding to the times that we live in. And so when you understand that we are in this ecological and humanitarian crisis around the way that stuff is made and our relationship to stuff, then the only way of recognizing that in terms of how we choose to get dressed is to make our style reflect our understanding of these times and our desire to be part of a different story. And then presence is where the inner work, the inner aspects of our beings comes into play. And so presence is also the name of my leadership mentoring. It's also the name of Presence Collective, the amazing community that we have that is all about embodying the values of this podcast and the themes of this podcast into our daily lives. And for me, presence is around knowing who we are. It's around being connected to our souls. It's our ability to to radiate that. And in those sort of ways of thinking, when I was very much in the fashion world and like in that position of being an insecure woman trying to carve my identity to be accepted and be seen and be loved and be recognized, I remember just watching all those perfume adverts that we grew up around. You know, the woman, she like walks into the room and everyone's eyes turn, and like that being the notion of presence that I grew up with, you know, turning heads. And then actually realizing that to really be noticed in a room, like when you're so much in your presence, when you're embodying your truth, people notice you. They just can't help but notice you because you have presence. It's coming from the inside. It's not a perfume or a gown or being like so perfectly constructed that you're inaccessible to other, you know? And this sort of wafty notion of style and presence and fashion and like the inaccessibility and the coolness and all of that false identity. And what it comes down to for me is worth. When we understand our own innate worth and we understand the worth of the world, we understand the worth of those communities, the artisan communities, the women in the garment factories, when we understand the worth of our rivers. And so we don't want to pollute them with toxic chemical dyes. You know, that relationship between self-worth and the worth of the world. What has been interesting with this book is that I had an agent and then I kind of changed the book and made it much more about this weaving of these notions of worth. And it wasn't quite understood at the time. And then I kind of, that agent was like, I don't really get this anymore. It's trying to do too many things. What are you trying to do here? And I'm like, I'm trying to open up that understanding that it is our lack of self-worth because of our disconnection that feeds this whole system where worth is stripped out of everything. In order to not need that dress or to not need those pair of shoes or that makeup, you know, perhaps many people listening to this are like beyond that consciousness. But I don't know. I think most of us can relate to having a moment where we don't have anything to wear. Like we've got these wardrobes and closets full of stuff. And it's like, I just don't have the thing to wear to go to this job interview or to go on this date or whatever it is. And that kind of feeling. And it's obviously nothing to do with what you have. It's very much an inside feeling. And this doesn't take away from adornment and the joy of beautifully crafted jewelry and clothing with rich stories of the way in which they're enriching the lives of the people connected to that supply chain, and having something that you wear and you enjoy and you feel the love and the power and the beauty of it. I'd love for us all to get dressed in that way every single day. But so many of us are caught up, and I recognized in myself at that time that I was also within this false identity, and that I'd replaced a clothing addiction with like a sustainable clothing addiction. But ultimately, if that driver in me that needed the thing, if I wasn't able to heal that, then it's all just part of the same machine. And it's just got a different supply chain. How can we kind of recognize that? And so it's the importance of the inner work in that construct of ourselves, and then being able to let go of the false identities that we're holding so dear. For some reason, this book's never happened. I did actually then get an agent for it again that kind of got it, and other projects kept coming in. And so I never like rewrote it. And who knows, it might still emerge as a book if that's necessary. But with it being 2020 and everything else that's been emerging, I just feel like making this offering to women feels so important to me, and to create community around where these different aspects of worth come together in the inner and the outer planes, and then in terms of in our houses and in the consumption and the capitalism and the landfills. You know, it's all connected. And so what I've decided to do is to do it as an online summit. Therefore, it becomes a collaborative, collective journey that we can go on over a few days. And this is going to happen over Diwali, which is over the November new moon. And it's really that time of honoring the light inside of us. And so it feels like a really nice time to have that conversation and to bring different people. I mean, I'm saying it's for women, but if you identify as woman, or even if you don't identify as women and you want to come, no one's going to stop you from signing up. But I want to bring together different women that I've come across in my journey, that I've connected with, around this notion of the interconnectedness of everything, of how it all weaves together, and it ultimately is all about our sense of worth. I saw something just yesterday on Instagram, this amazing woman, Bandana, who I'm going to invite onto the summit. And somebody asked her the question, can you have sustainability without spirituality? And I haven't watched the video, but even just the question, I was like, yes, like everything needs to be interconnected and woven together. We need to understand like that it's that lack and that disconnection that is feeding this horrific system, which is enslaving so many people in so many different situations, whether it's enslaving those that are putting all of their money and their energy into buying stuff and perfectly presenting it back on Instagram, or whether it's those women that are working in these factories that are being force-fed contraceptives, that are not getting paid if like they went to the toilet for too long, like horrendous things, that are being sexually assaulted, that are being paid hardly anything, all to create that. And it's like, it's just complete madness. And it's time for us to rise out of the madness of it. And for me, style and presence is that invitation to not keep perpetuating, like to not playing half in and half out. Like I'm into sustainability and non-toxic, but like I'm also really still into like this industry, this notion, the magazines, like all of it. It's like, I think this is our time. Like, are we just gonna say like, actually, I'm a human being and I have worth and I have innate beauty. I'm here to contribute much more than that. And yes, great, I'm going to enjoy adornment if that's my thing, but it's not going to be my whole identity.
Yes, and I think, we live at a real beautiful crossroads where we can decide, do we want to create a more beautiful world? What is that going to look like? The conversations you are going to be inviting there are a really, really beautiful step, especially as it is around the ideas of what we maybe perceive as beauty, our adornments, our style. Is a very broad word, it's a broad idea. But fashion, as in fast fashion, and I suppose the overwhelming destruction that goes with it, is a very big part of it that we have an opportunity to change. And with that, change the lives of so many people that so many people are not aware of, that are interconnected into that system of destruction. Fashion always was the vehicle to do that. It's interesting to see right now that a lot of fashion brands are stepping into that space of wanting to push messages, or they're trying to push messages, but it's still just a marketing facade. It's a very difficult thing for me to witness, because we can do so much better. I know we can do so much better. We've done it. People are doing it in the fashion space, are doing it differently and setting those examples. And I think we really have to turn to those voices. I think it's a very good time to be doing that and not have it under the disguise of sustainability, which in itself has become somewhat lost terminology. So I'm very excited, Amisha. I'm very excited to be able to witness a new space emerging there, and also actually taking you back to this thinking of how you've taken the freedom along the journey for this to become what it needs to become. it clearly didn't want to be a book just yet. It wants to be maybe a more connected and broader conversation at this point. And you trusting that. Thank you for trusting that. I think that's very beautiful.
Thank you. I feel like it needs to be more alive, and it needs to be more collaborative, and it needs to be experiential and emergent. What was interesting is that one of the main subtitle that I had on it for years was "Take off your masks and wear your authenticity." And that feels in 2020 like a whole different thing.
But I guess when we are online digitally all together, when we join your summit, we don't have to wear our masks. So we can come as we are.
Exactly. You will not be causing harm if you come maskless.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it comes back to this question or this theme of cultural futurism, how this summit, this conversation, talking about fashion, it's the same. It's all of the same stuff. It's all of the same values of connecting to that freedom in ourselves and that possibility. The reminder that we are here for more. We're here to be more.
That's why I also like your title, that it's style and presence, because I think style is really an expression of our personalities, of our true selves in many ways, and maybe leaves more room for embedding messages that are a little bit more hidden and more subtle if we don't want to be outspoken about our own personal beliefs and our values. I don't find it very exciting to be a consumer either. But I do find some of the latest, coolest fashion also very interesting to incorporate into our style. And I think there's a lot of potential to do that in different ways.
Absolutely. When it comes from creativity and innovation, understanding the needs and the real experience of this world, that's what makes something beautiful. All kinds of beautiful things that I have in my life that have meaning and they have a story behind them. And there's so much beauty that is part of that whole process of how that came to be. You know, was it William Morris that said everything in your house should be useful or beautiful?
Something along those lines. Yes. And I think the idea of that actually that whatever we surround ourselves with and connect with to wear, for those to be meaningful to ourselves, I think that is already a very big shift of thinking around fashion. I would definitely think that coming from that place when you purchase something already makes you think about your purchase in a different way. It makes you also think about how you want to live with that purchase.
And to come back to your first question at the beginning of this conversation around beautiful leadership, I've been contemplating also this theme of leadership for a long time, perhaps my whole life, at least my whole adult life. I have been exploring the ways in which to be a leader of meaning. This is because I always had that soul essence and that vision that was around reimagination, that was around how can things be better, that was around creating beauty. Although, you know, maybe in those days I studied politics, so making an impact, and like there was different language around it. And also, I guess impact became the language of social business and that whole movement. For me, you know, that started off in politics, and I really wanted to be a politician and to go in that traditional way in order to have the opportunity to seed different ways of being into our culture. And I suppose on my journey over the last 20 years now, since I was, you know, thinking about what I wanted to do in the world, what I wanted to be, that this has been a living exploration into what is beautiful leadership. And it has taken many forms, from working in politics, from being part of the first ever ethical fashion awards ceremony, from designing jewelry and creating a label without training in design and without a supply chain, before you could Google ethical fashion. And it was ethical before it was sustainable. Soon it will be regenerative fashion. And then the next thing. I've spent the last 20 years like teaching myself a lot of things. I've spent a lot of the last 20 years like unlearning the ways in which I was told you had to do things in order to reconcile what actually felt resonant with my whole being and actually felt in alignment with what I was trying to do and didn't feel like a compromise. I've done a lot of things. I've tried a lot of things. This project started 10 years ago around politics and political engagement. And if we can't trust traditional politics, then we need to be inspired within ourselves, and we need to have permission within ourselves to not only vision the future that we choose, but to create it and to invite others into that co-creation. And for me, this is all beautiful leadership. And over the last 8 years, as I've been training in more facilitation and in the yoga and the spirituality, and then I've been working one-on-one with people around subconscious patterning and essentially healing what keeps us disconnected from our sense of our own worth and our own possibility and our own vision. And also in my one-to-one sessions, I work with energy and with the subconscious. And the language that I use for what we're doing is that we plant seeds. We plant seeds of qualities that are dormant within, qualities that for whatever reason through our culture didn't get embedded in us in the first 7 years of our lives, when a lot of who we are is formed, because we didn't have these seeds in our body. Like, we're detached from that part of our essence. Sometimes these are very simple seeds like self-worth and self-confidence, and sometimes they're way more descriptive and are of that person's own intuitive gifts and their own soul essence. And so for 5 years now, I have been offering presence leadership mentoring, and that's been one-to-one work, which has been partly around maybe there's an actual idea, like a business or something that's being birthed or created, or the next stages of are unfolding. And so we will discuss that, and we will offer like different options and pathways and creative strategy. A lot of it has all been around the inner work as well, of like clearing away the trauma patterns, the ancestral trauma, the fear, and planting these seeds within that open us up to our possibility and allow us to embody that possibility in our lives. I had been thinking for a while that I wanted to create a course that would go along with presence mentoring, so that there would be a place for those that are newer to some of these concepts or that need reminding, that there would be resources that would take us through different core themes in a way that really offers that support. And then actually what came really clear and through was, this is beautiful leadership. It's an immersion. It's not a course. It's a re-remembrance, a reimagining, a reconnection to the possibilities. And how wonderful would it be in this moment that we're in 2020, as we've been assimilating and processing everything that's been coming up to the surface during this year. We now have 4 months left till the end of 2020, 4 months left of this like portal into vision, of which 2020 is providing. And so how wonderful would it be to create a collective experience where we can explore this notion and really immerse ourselves in this notion of beautiful leadership. And so that's the invitation. We're starting next week. Everyone's welcome, and they can do it just as the immersion or with the mentoring aspect as well. I'm also designing like how to do an online course so that it's not just like I just sit at the computer, but actually that a lot of what will come through the course is stuff that happens nowhere near the computer, and it's very much immersive in the participant's whole life during this period, with that knowledge and shared experience that there are other people around the world that are going to be going on this journey at the same time. And we're going to have like little home pods of, you'll have like 3 or 4 people that you're in more connection with, as well as the calls where we're all together, and the little resources. And there's an amazing guest faculty that are emerging that are going to come and offer masterclasses or pop up just for these little like 3-minute missions that they're going to give. And it feels really beautiful to be making this offering. And for me, it also feels like a letting go of all of the ways in which I've been told to be a leader or to create a business or to do anything in the world, and actually a real invitation into the intuition, into the softer ways. That this will also support somebody that is running like a global business. Like it's all just real connections of being more human and listening, being able to translate that information that comes from soul into being, into this world.
Wonderful. That is so, it just feels amazing to receive, even just your description around it. I can't wait to participate. And I think this idea of that this can suit even somebody who is running a global business, I think that every business bears fruits through transformation. It is always valuable to go through a process where we can dig deeper and stand more true. I am really excited for this. It feels like start a new year. I think we all need that at this time. People who feel that they are not called into leadership will benefit from this for their own personal leadership, for leading themselves into whatever it is they might feel blocked by, or whatever it is they might envision. So I think this idea of leadership not just being about leading others, but also really very much about leading ourselves into what can be, is a really, really powerful thing.
Absolutely. It feels like there is still this time before this year ends. We can make it really count in terms of our own inner transformation and what we're creating in the world. Also, it's about reframing this understanding of what leadership is, and it being domination, and it being certainty, and it being like knowing the answers and getting people to do what you're doing. And actually, when I talk about leadership, it's really about not being a follower, and we're being entrained into being followers, right? That's like the language of our social media, which is such a huge part of our world. And actually recognizing that every single one of us is creating the future by how we're spending our time, money, and energy. And that means that whatever it is that you're doing, that is part of what is being woven into the future. For me, leadership is that reclaiming of the intentionality of how we spend our time, our money, and our energy. And it's completely applicable to running a business, to being a parent, to starting a project, to hosting a community. And it's also completely applicable to being a human being at this time that wants to live with a sense of intentionality, and that you might not do anything really grand with it, but understanding that by going on that journey, by reclaiming your essence as a leader, not a follower, by reclaiming the worth of your existence, that you are co-creating the future. And so I'll be inviting the individuals that come to be part of this collective experience to come with an intention, that inner transformational intention, as well as something that they want to create in the world or that they want to nurture in the world. And it can be so small as well. Like, it doesn't have to be like the grand change the world idea. It can be something very gentle and very much in relation to what the experience of this pandemic has put in front of you. How can my leadership be relational with my family and in a new kind of way? How can that be part of the beautiful future? Like, it doesn't all have to be this like grand idea and this thing that's gonna, change the world. And you and I have been in those worlds a lot, and in that place where it's all about like this mission at what cost. And I think now it's not about like hemming ourselves through something to make something happen, but leadership is reciprocal. It's listening. It's in relationship to earth and to the more than human world and to each other. The themes that we're going to be exploring during this 13 weeks are redefining leadership and worth, wholeness, trauma and liberation, embodiment and biohacking, edge walking vision and intuition, creativity and flow consciousness, and collaboration and community. And it's going to start as well. I'm going to give the Rituals for Wellbeing course that I created, as well as the Presence Meditation course, so that we have these tools, and also an introduction into the beauty way, which is actually a Navajo prayer of how we can live in this way of beauty.
I've gone into my body just listening to you, of wanting to experience it. So I can't wait. This is going to be a very powerful community that will come together there to journey and seeing themselves in a new light. And I think it's very beautiful for something like this to also come out during the times that we live in. Very special. Thank you. And thank you for the clarity of words, of presenting something like this to us.
Honestly, my soul is asking for this as well. And that is a good motivator in creating something, because I want to go on this journey. I want to feel into what emerges. I want to learn from the group of people that's coming together. And I've started to invite guest facilitators in, and so far we've had big yeses from like Sally Kempton, Nina Simons, Stephanie Mines, Uma Dinsmore-Tooley, you. And as well as that, we have other things that others have been sharing during this journey. And also, once the group forms and we have our opening ceremony, the garden of this immersion itself will start to show us where to nurture it and how to nurture it. And one of the other things that was said in this call that we had with the patrons, which they are so beautiful, these calls, they're very, very nourishing, was this same woman, Amy, who is a gardener who works with the land, said that everything about this, the weather has been so extreme during this time. It's been like long, hot days, or then like very stormy. And it's not been the kind of weather that you can predict. And it's not been the kind of weather that makes it easy to tend the garden. Learning to garden in that uncertainty. And as she was speaking, I really felt in myself, oh, like that's how it's also been in our inner worlds this year. Like that, I feel many of us have been feeling very extreme emotions as we have been coming to terms with everything that is coming to the surface in our inner worlds and in the world that we're experiencing around us. And so this space of emergence and uncertainty and collaboration are so key. And I feel like what I'm offering in this immersion are what I see as the life skills of this time. You know, if I ran schools. Like, this is what I'd be teaching. This is what we need. And these are skills that are not so easy to find and not put together in this kind of way. And I think as we're sort of reimagining the education that we need and the skills that we need, and that this is all part of it. And so what I'm really hoping to offer through this immersion, through the guests that come to be part of this, and through the people that participate and share their gifts and skills and knowledge, that we're going to create something that's going to be so transformative and really offering something of immense power for these times. Of course, I don't mean domination. I mean that power that comes from within, that comes from source, that comes from love, that comes from connection, and that's the power that we need to be nurturing in this new story.
The tools and the power to help us hone and flourish our own gardens. How exciting. And there's no better place for this to happen than actually in the digital sphere, because that's where all of us are hanging out at this time. And I think what's exciting as well is the idea of how we can create engaging experiences in those spaces. Experiences that still build our human connection and that actually forge a new way of understanding those without needing to be with each other physically. I think that's also a very powerful offering here. In terms of one detail, please tell us exactly when it will start and how we can sign up for it.
It's going to start on Monday, the 14th of September. In terms of pricing, there's going to be 3 different pricing options in this aspect of paying what we can. And with that, honoring not just our perception of how much money we have, but really like our ancestral story and the communities that we're serving, and where the motivation comes from for taking part in this. And with that, honoring that obviously the more that people can pay, the more helpful that is in the creation of the course and the guests and everything else that's coming into be. Yeah, you can find out about it on the Future is Beautiful website if you click on courses. So the futurisbeautiful.co, and if you click on courses there, it will take you to that page.
Wonderful. Wow. This has been an enriching conversation. Thank you so much, Amisha. Having seen you grow into a place of so much clarity with what you are offering and really bringing together so many years of experience into different ideas, into very practical and tangible tools that we can all access. I don't just want to thank you as your friend and as another woman, also, operating with my own ideas. I hold a lot of admiration for how much you've given to yourself in this process and used your creativity and your imagination and your soul and spirit to continuously offer. Thank you. Thank you for that.
It's been my pleasure. And I feel it's been challenging at many, many times. I feel like when things stop being challenging, probably we're done anyway with being here. Yeah, I feel really grateful to have great mentors and friends, supportive community along this path, and really hope that in these times of uncertainty and distancing, that we can use what we have available to us to create more connection and possibility. And that feels to be what it's all about.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mentioned in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question: how will you create beauty in the world?